She reached out her hand, polite, professional, harmless. But in that single moment, it wasn't just rejected, it was dismissed, as if her very existence didn't deserve respect. What seemed like a simple refusal was far more than an insult. It was a mirror reflecting an ugly truth that still runs deep in our world. And within just one day, that act of arrogance would set off a chain reaction no one could stop. How could a single moment of hatred unravel an empire built over decades? Her name was Maya, a young professional, sharp, ambitious, and full of quiet pride. She had worked her way up in an industry where faces like hers were often missing from boardrooms. Every morning, she carried herself with a calm determination, knowing that her presence alone challenged expectations. To colleagues, she was competent, kind, and impossible to ignore. On this day, everything seemed routine. A networking event, polished suits, and smiles exchanged across tables. Maya had been to dozens of these before, always pushing through the subtle whispers and sideways glances. But she also knew that beneath the polished surface, the room wasn't always welcoming. And then it happened. A gesture so small, so seemingly insignificant, that most might have brushed it off. But this wasn't just about a hand left hanging in the air. It was about something deeper, something uglier. What Maya didn't know was that this single moment of rejection was about to expose not only one woman's prejudice, but the fragility of an empire built on arrogance. The refusal spread through the room like a spark in dry grass. Some noticed immediately the way Maya's hand hovered in the air, left untouched before she slowly pulled it back. Others pretended not to see, shifting uncomfortably in their seats, while the woman who had turned away carried on with her flawless smile as though nothing had happened. For Maya, the sting was sharp but familiar. It wasn't the first time she had been dismissed because of who she was, and deep down, she feared it wouldn't be the last. But this was different. This wasn't a whispered slight or a shadow of bias. It was public. It was humiliating. And it was deliberate. She tried to brush it off, to hold her posture, to remind herself that she belonged in that room as much as anyone else. But the whispers began anyway. Subtle glances, nervous laughs, people choosing silence over decency. It was the kind of silence that screamed louder than any words. The woman who refused her hand wasn't just anyone. She was the polished face of a billion-dollar empire, known for her charm, her philanthropy, her supposed advocacy for equality. Cameras followed her everywhere, headlines adored her, and investors trusted her. Yet in that moment, she showed something raw, unpolished, something she couldn't control when faced with Maya's presence. Maya left the event that night with a heavy weight pressing on her chest. She had seen hypocrisy before, but never this blatant. She wondered if speaking out would even matter, if anyone would believe her, or if her words would simply vanish into the noise. After all, powerful people had ways of burying uncomfortable truths. But then, something happened that even Maya couldn't have predicted. A guest at the event, quietly recording footage for social media, had captured the exchange. No narration, no editing, just a clear, undeniable moment. A hand offered, a cold refusal, and the smirk that followed. Within hours, the video began to spread. At first, just a trickle, shared among small circles, a few comments of outrage. But by morning, it had erupted into a storm. Millions had seen it, millions had judged it, and millions weren't willing to stay silent. As the empire scrambled for damage control, the cracks began to show. Stockholders panicked. Employees whispered about what they had endured behind closed doors. Former partners began stepping forward, their voices joining the chorus. One act of arrogance had lit a fire that couldn't be contained. And while Maya watched from the sidelines, the world began to do what she never thought possible. It turned its gaze toward the woman who had dismissed her humanity. But this was only the beginning. The real collapse was still to come. The empire's glossy facade shattered in real time. News anchors replayed the footage on loop, analysts debated it, and hashtags demanded accountability. What had once been a story whispered behind closed doors was now a global reckoning. But the woman at the center of it all wasn't backing down. She dismissed the outrage as misunderstood, claimed it was taken out of context. Yet every word she spoke only added fuel to the fire. Former employees came forward with stories of discrimination. Investors pulled funding, and entire communities turned their backs. For Maya, watching it unfold was surreal. A single moment she had wanted to forget was now the spark for something far bigger. But even as the empire crumbled, she couldn't shake the weight of what had happened. That hand, her hand, still remembered the sting of rejection. It wasn't just about one woman's arrogance. It was about the countless times dignity had been denied to people who looked like her. Then came the breaking point. A live interview, broadcast worldwide, where the once celebrated CEO was asked directly, "Why did you refuse to shake her hand?" Cameras zoomed in. Silence stretched across the air. Her carefully constructed mask faltered, and in that hesitation, the truth spilled out, not in words, but in the coldness of her expression. It was over. In that moment, the world saw her not as a leader, not as a visionary, but as a symbol of the very prejudice she pretended to fight against. Sponsors withdrew instantly, markets collapsed, and her empire, built over decades, began to fall in days. And yet, as the cameras cut, one haunting question remained. If it hadn't been caught on film, would anyone have cared? In the days that followed, Maya found herself at the center of a storm she hadn't asked for. Strangers reached out with messages of support, while news outlets dissected every second of the footage. She hadn't spoken a single word publicly, yet her silence carried more weight than the empire's endless statements. For Maya, the fall of that billion-dollar giant wasn't a victory to celebrate. It was a reminder of how fragile dignity could be, how quickly humanity could be denied with a simple gesture. The sting of that moment would remain with her, not because of the woman who refused her hand, but because of what it represented, a truth millions live every single day, often without cameras to catch it. The world moved fast to condemn one woman, but the deeper question lingered. What about the countless others? The teachers, the workers, the students whose stories never go viral? What about the hands left hanging in silence, unseen and unacknowledged? This story wasn't just about one act of arrogance or the collapse of an empire. It was about the weight of history, the persistence of prejudice, and the power of exposure. A single video forced the world to look, but real change will take more than outrage. It will take action, empathy, and the courage to confront injustice every time it appears. So ask yourself, if you were in that room, in that moment, would you have stayed silent? Or would you have reached out, not just to shake a hand, but to stand for what's right? Disclaimer: the stories on this channel are works of fiction created solely for entertainment. Any resemblance to real people, events, or organizations is purely coincidental. Our goal is to share thought-provoking narratives that inspire fairness, equality, and positive change. These stories are not based on actual individuals or occurrences and carry no political or religious implications.